Welcome back to the Creepy Horror. Tonight, I'm sharing 3 true horror stories sent to me by real people. Stories that actually happened and left a mark on their lives. Each one made me pause when I read it, and I knew I had to share it with you. Before we dive in, I want to know, where are you watching from and what time is it? I love seeing how far these stories reach, and it always reminds me that fear doesn't care about distance or time. Let's get started. Story 1. The Basement Apartment. Before I read this one, I should explain why it stayed with me. It came through my email buried between dozens of short submissions, and I almost skipped it entirely. What stopped me was a single line about a smell that didn't belong in a clean apartment. That detail lingered longer than it should have. The email was signed with the name Marcus, and he mentioned he'd never shared this story publicly before, not even with close friends. So let me begin reading the email the way it was sent to me. I was 22 when this happened, living in a basement apartment in an older part of the city. The rent was cheap enough that I didn't ask too many questions about why it had been vacant for 3 months. The landlord told me the previous tenant had moved out suddenly for work, but the way he said it felt rehearsed, like he'd practiced that explanation. The apartment was long and narrow, carved out of what used to be storage space beneath a 3-story house. You entered through a separate door at street level, then descended a steep staircase into a corridor with rooms branching off. Kitchen and bathroom near the entrance, living area in the middle, bedroom at the far end. The bedroom bothered me from the start, though I couldn't explain why. It was the furthest point from the entrance, windowless, with walls that felt damp even in summer. The landlord had installed a dehumidifier that ran constantly, its hum becoming the soundtrack to my sleep. I moved in on a Saturday in September. Spent the weekend unpacking, arranging furniture, trying to make the space feel less like a cave. By Monday I'd settled into a routine. Work during the day, home by 6, dinner, TV, sleep. On the 4th night, I woke to a sound I couldn't identify. Not loud, just persistent. A soft scraping, like something being dragged slowly across concrete. It was coming from somewhere behind the bedroom wall. I sat up and listened. The sound continued for maybe 30 seconds, then stopped. I checked my phone, 3:17 a.m. The dehumidifier hummed steadily. Nothing else. I convinced myself it was pipes or the house settling. Old buildings make noise. I went back to sleep. The next night the same sound woke me. Same time, 3:17 a.m. Same duration, same scraping rhythm. This time I got up and pressed my ear against the wall. The sound was definitely coming from the other side, but there was nothing there. Just dirt and foundation, according to the landlord. I mentioned it the following day when I saw him collecting rent checks. He frowned, asked which wall. When I pointed to the bedroom's back wall, his expression shifted slightly. "That's exterior," he said. "Nothing behind there but earth. Probably just settling. These old houses shift." He didn't meet my eyes when he said it. The sound continued. Every night at 3:17 a.m., lasting about 30 seconds. Always the same scraping rhythm, always from the same section of wall. After a week I started losing sleep. I'd lie awake from 3 a.m. onward waiting for it. When it came, I'd listen intently, trying to discern a pattern or source. When it stopped, I'd be too alert to fall back asleep. On the 10th night, the scraping was louder. And longer. It went on for nearly 2 minutes, with a new element. A rhythmic tapping interspersed with the scraping, like something testing the wall's solidity. I grabbed my phone and recorded it. The audio was faint but captured the sound clearly enough. I played it back several times. It didn't sound like settling or pipes. It sounded deliberate. The next morning, I called the landlord and asked if I could inspect behind the wall. He was quiet for a moment, then said there was no access point. The basement had been sealed when they converted it to living space. Sealed from what? I asked. "Just old storage," he said. "Root cellar maybe. Nothing worth opening up." That answer didn't satisfy me, but I let it go. I had a lease. I needed the cheap rent. I could live with some unexplained noise. Then I noticed the smell. It started subtly, a faint, earthy odor in the bedroom that I initially attributed to the dampness. But over the next few days it intensified. Not decay exactly, but something organic and wrong. Like soil that had been disturbed after years of stillness. I bought air fresheners. Ran the dehumidifier at maximum. Opened the bathroom vent fan to circulate air. Nothing helped. The smell grew stronger, concentrated near the back wall. On the 14th night, I woke before 3:17 a.m. I was already awake when the scraping started. But this time it was different. The scraping was closer, louder. And it was accompanied by a new sound, breathing. Slow, labored breathing, like someone exerting effort. I didn't move. I lay in bed, frozen, listening to something on the other side of the wall scraping and breathing and working towards something I didn't want to understand. After 3 minutes, it stopped. The breathing faded. Silence returned. I didn't sleep the rest of that night. In the morning, I examined the wall closely, and I found something I'd missed before. Near the baseboard, almost hidden by the bed frame, was a crack. Thin but distinct, running vertically for about 6 inches. I crouched down and looked closely. The crack was slightly wider at the bottom, and when I put my face near it, the smell hit me full force. I moved the bed away from the wall. The crack continued down to the floor and disappeared beneath the baseboard. I pulled the baseboard away. It came loose easily as if it had been removed before. Behind the baseboard was a gap between the wall and the floor. And in that gap I could see darkness. Not just shadow, but an opening, like the wall wasn't flush against the foundation. I got a flashlight and shone it into the gap. I saw dirt. And something else. Something that looked like fabric, old and rotted, partially buried in the soil. I stepped back, my stomach turning. I grabbed my phone and called the landlord. Told him I'd found something behind the wall and he needed to come immediately. He arrived within 20 minutes, which seemed too fast. Like he'd been waiting for this call. He looked at the wall, at the gap, at the fabric. His face went pale. "You need to move out," he said quietly. "What is that?" I asked. "I don't know. And I don't want to know. I'll break your lease. No penalty. Just pack your things and go." I stared at him. You knew something was back there. He didn't deny it. The previous tenant found it too. That's why he left. And the one before him. This apartment, it shouldn't be rented. I know that. But I needed the income. "What's behind the wall?" I demanded. He shook his head. "I'm calling someone. You need to leave. Today." I packed my essentials and left that afternoon. Stayed with a friend while I found a new place. The landlord refunded my deposit and first month's rent without argument. When I asked what they found, he wouldn't answer. 2 months later, I drove past the building. The basement apartment door was boarded up. A notice posted on it said the unit was permanently closed due to structural concerns. I looked up the building's history. Found an old article from the 1950s. A family had lived there and their teenage daughter had gone missing. Her body was never found. The parents died years later, still searching for her. The house had been renovated multiple times since then. The basement converted to storage, then to living space, then sealed again, then reopened. I don't know what was behind that wall. The fabric I saw, the smell, the scraping and breathing. I don't want to know. But sometimes, late at night in my new apartment on the 3rd floor of a modern building with windows and light, I still wake at 3:17 a.m. And for a moment I think I hear it. That slow, deliberate scraping. That labored breathing. And I remember that smell. Earth and wrongness and something that had been buried but wasn't done yet. I'm glad I left when I did. Because on my last night there, after I'd decided to move out but before the landlord arrived, I heard something different. Not scraping. Not breathing. Knocking. 3 slow knocks from inside the wall. Like something asking to be let out. Story 2. The Night Shift at the Archive. This next story came from someone who simply signed it J. No explanation, no backstory. Just the events laid out in careful detail. I reached out twice asking for more context but never received a reply. The email address is no longer active, so I'll share it exactly as it was sent. I worked night security at a document archive from 2018 to 2019. The facility stored historical records, legal documents, and municipal files in a converted warehouse on the industrial edge of town. My shift ran from 10 p.m. to 6 a.m., Wednesday through Sunday. The job was simple. Monitor security cameras, conduct hourly walkthroughs, log any irregularities, and ensure the climate control systems remained operational. The documents were sensitive, some dating back over a century, and required specific temperature and humidity levels. The building was 3 stories with a basement level. My station was on the 1st floor near the main entrance. Security cameras covered all entrances, stairwells, and major corridors, but not the storage aisles themselves. Budget constraints, I was told. For the first month, nothing unusual occurred. I would read, watch videos on my phone, and complete the required walkthroughs without incident. The building was quiet. Empty. Exactly what a night security job should be. In early November, I noticed something during my 2 a.m. walkthrough. I was checking the 3rd floor when I heard a sound from one of the aisles. Not loud, just a soft rustling like papers being moved. I stopped and listened. The sound continued for a few seconds, then stopped. I walked down the aisle, flashlight in hand. The storage boxes were arranged in floor-to-ceiling shelves, each labeled with dates and reference codes. Nothing appeared disturbed. I completed my check and returned to the first floor. The next night I heard it again. Same floor, different aisle. This time, the rustling was accompanied by a faint creaking, like the shelves shifting under weight. I investigated thoroughly. Checked for rodents, for air vents that might be blowing papers, for any mechanical cause. Found nothing. On the third night, I decided to review the security footage. The cameras didn't cover the aisles, but they did cover the corridor entrances. I pulled up the footage from 2 a.m. and watched. The corridor was empty. No one entered or left the aisles during the time I heard the sounds. I checked the basement level footage. Also empty. Then I noticed something in the stairwell camera feed. At 2:17 a.m., the camera showed a brief distortion. The image pixelated for maybe 3 seconds, then cleared. No explanation. Digital interference, I assumed. The following night, the rustling sounds were louder. And they were on the second floor this time, in a section housing court records from the 1970s. I went to investigate, moving slowly, listening carefully. When I reached the aisle, the sound stopped. But the air felt different, colder. And there was a smell, faint but distinct. Musty paper and something else. Something chemical, like old adhesive or preservative. I turned the corner into the aisle and saw something that made me stop. One of the boxes on the shelf was open. The lid was completely off, resting on the shelf beside it. The documents inside were partially pulled out, as if someone had been searching through them. I hadn't opened that box. No one else had access to the building during my shift. I checked the security logs. No entry recorded. No alarm triggered. I closed the box and continued my rounds. When I returned to my station, I reviewed the footage again. The stairwell camera showed the same distortion at the same time, 2:17 a.m. I reported the incident to my supervisor the next morning. He looked at the footage, checked the logs, and said it was probably a glitch. The box had likely been left open by day staff. But I knew that wasn't true. I had walked that aisle the previous night, and the box had been closed. The pattern continued. Every night, at some point between 2 o'clock and 3 a.m., I would hear sounds. Rustling, creaking, sometimes footsteps on the floor above me when I was on the first floor, or below me when I was on the third. The stairwell camera showed distortions every night at 2:17 a.m. And every night, I would find evidence of disturbance. A box opened. Documents displaced. Once, an entire shelf of files had been reorganized in reverse chronological order. No one else had access. The doors were locked. The cameras showed no entry. In late November, I experienced something more direct. I was on the basement level conducting my 3 a.m. check. The basement housed the oldest documents, some from the 1800s, and was kept cooler than the upper floors. The temperature was always uncomfortable down there. I was checking the climate control panel when I heard footsteps behind me. Clear, distinct footsteps on the concrete floor. I turned around. The aisle was empty. But the footsteps continued. They moved past me, heading deeper into the basement. I could track their progress by sound, heel strike, toe lift, rhythm steady. I followed them. Flashlight beams sweeping ahead of me. Shelves on both sides, boxes stacked high. The footsteps stopped at the end of the aisle, where the basement terminated in a brick wall. I reached the wall. There was nothing there. No one. No explanation. But the air was freezing. My breath came out in visible clouds. And the smell was strong here, old paper and that chemical odor, but also something organic. Like damp cloth. I backed away and returned to the stairs. As I climbed, I heard the footsteps again. This time they were following me. I didn't run. I walked deliberately, maintaining control. But I could hear them behind me, matching my pace step for step. When I reached the first floor and the door closed behind me, the footsteps stopped. I reviewed the basement camera. It only covered the stairwell entrance. At 3:14 a.m., the same distortion appeared. 3 seconds of pixelated image. When it cleared, the camera showed me climbing the stairs alone. But I had heard those footsteps. I had felt that cold air. In December, the disturbances escalated. I began finding documents laid out on tables, arranged in specific patterns, chronological sequences, sometimes grouped by subject matter, all criminal cases or all probate records or all property transfers. Someone, or something, was sorting through the archive. Systematically, methodically. I stopped doing full walkthroughs. I stayed at my station and monitored the cameras. Whatever was happening in those aisles, I didn't want to encounter it directly. On my last night working there, December 19th, I was sitting at my desk when every camera feed went dark simultaneously. Complete blackout. Not just distortion. Total loss of signal. The emergency lights activated. The building was on backup power. I checked the climate control system. Offline. I tried calling my supervisor. No answer. I sat in the dim glow of the emergency lights and listened. The building was utterly silent. No hum from the HVAC. No ambient noise. Just silence. Then I heard movement on the floor above me. Multiple footsteps. Crossing back and forth. Purposeful movement like people working. The cameras came back online. I checked the feeds immediately. Empty. Every floor showed empty corridors. But the footsteps continued. I could hear them clearly now. On the second floor. In the aisles. Moving boxes. Rustling papers. I grabbed my keys and left. Walked out the front door without looking back. I called my supervisor from my car. Told him there was a power failure and I was checking the exterior breakers. I didn't mention the footsteps. I never returned to that building. I submitted my resignation via email the next day, citing health reasons. My supervisor called and tried to convince me to stay. Said they needed reliable night staff. I declined. A week later, I received an email from him. Short. Direct. I understand why you left. The building has a history. We don't talk about it, but everyone who works nights eventually notices. Some stay. Most don't. I don't blame you. I never asked what he meant by history. I didn't want to know. But I did some research. Found old newspaper articles about the warehouse before it became an archive. In 1963, there was a fire. 3 night shift workers died. They were trapped in the basement when the stairs collapsed. The building was rebuilt. Renovated multiple times. Eventually converted to document storage. The basement where I heard footsteps was the same basement where those workers died. I don't work security anymore. I found a day job. Steady hours. People around me. But sometimes I think about those sounds. The rustling papers. The organized documents. The footsteps. And I wonder if those night shift workers are still there. Still working. Still sorting through files in the quiet hours between 2 and 3 a.m. Still trapped in a shift that never ended. Story 3, the apartment above mine. The third story tonight came from Maya. Her email was the longest I received, written over several days with timestamps showing she'd worked on it in the early morning hours. She apologized for the length but said she needed to include every detail for it to make sense. I've condensed it only slightly, keeping her voice intact. I moved into a second-floor apartment in a converted house in April 2021. The building was divided into 4 units, 2 on the ground floor, 2 on the second. Mine was the front unit upstairs with large windows facing the street. The back unit, directly above the stairs, had been vacant since I moved in. The landlord mentioned they were renovating it. New floors, fresh paint, updated fixtures. It would be ready to rent by summer, he said. I didn't mind having no upstairs neighbor. The building was quiet. The couple on the ground floor kept to themselves. I had started a remote job during the pandemic and spent most of my time at home, which made the peace even more valuable. For the first month, everything was normal. I heard occasional sounds from the renovation. Hammering, footsteps, the scrape of furniture being moved. Always during the day. The workers would arrive around 9 a.m. and leave by 4 p.m. In early May, I noticed the sounds continuing after 4 p.m. At first, I thought the workers were putting in extra hours. But when I checked the driveway, no work vans were present. Just the residents' cars. I listened more carefully. Footsteps were crossing the empty apartment above me. Slow, measured steps. Back and forth. Like someone pacing. This continued for several evenings. Always between 5 and 7 p.m. Always the same pacing pattern. I mentioned it to the landlord when I saw him checking the mailboxes. He frowned. The renovation's been paused for 2 weeks, he said. Insurance issue. No one's been up there. Then who's walking around? I asked. He looked uncomfortable. You're probably hearing the couple downstairs. Sound travels weird in old houses. But I knew it wasn't the downstairs neighbors. The footsteps were directly above me. On the 3rd floor. Where no one should be. That night, I paid closer attention. The footsteps started at 5:17 p.m. I timed them. They would cross from one end of the apartment to the other, pause for exactly 30 seconds, then cross back. This pattern repeated for approximately 40 minutes. Then silence. I began documenting it. Noted the times, the patterns, the duration. Every night it was the same. 5:17 p.m. start time. 40 minutes of pacing. Then nothing. On May 12th, I decided to investigate. When the footsteps started, I went out into the hallway and looked up the stairs toward the 3rd floor landing. The door to the vacant apartment was closed. No light showed beneath it. I climbed the stairs quietly. As I got closer, the footsteps became clearer. Definitely coming from inside the apartment. Steady. Rhythmic. I knocked on the door. The footsteps stopped immediately. I waited. Knocked again. No response. I tried the doorknob. Locked. I returned to my apartment, unsettled. I called the landlord and told him someone was accessing the empty unit. He came over that evening with keys. We went upstairs together and he unlocked the door. The apartment was empty. Completely bare. The renovation was half finished. Subflooring exposed in some areas, drywall unpainted, fixtures missing. No furniture. No evidence anyone had been inside recently. See? The landlord said. Empty. But I had heard the footsteps. Clearly. Repeatedly. He suggested I was hearing sounds from outside or from the heating system, or from my own apartment somehow echoing. I knew he was wrong. But I didn't argue. After he left, I sat in my living room and waited. At 5:17 p.m., the footsteps started again. I recorded them on my phone. The audio captured the sound clearly, rhythmic footfalls directly above me. I sent the recording to my landlord. He didn't respond. The footsteps continued every night. I tried to ignore them. Wore headphones. Played music. Went out during those hours. But I always knew they were happening. In late May, something changed. The footsteps started occurring at other times. Not just the evening routine, but also late at night. 11 p.m., 1 a.m., 3 a.m. And they were no longer confined to the apartment above mine. I began hearing them in the hallway, on the stairs, outside my door. One night at 2:30 a.m., I woke to footsteps in the hallway. They approached my door, paused, then moved past toward the stairs. I got up and looked through the peephole. The hallway was empty, but I could still hear the footsteps descending the stairs. I opened my door and looked out. No one was there. But at the bottom of the stairs, I heard the front door of the building open and close. I went to my window, which overlooked the front entrance. No one emerged. No one was on the street. But I had heard the door. I had heard the footsteps. The next morning, I asked the downstairs couple if they'd heard anything. They looked at each other, then at me. You hear it too? The woman asked. I nodded. We've been hearing it since we moved in, she said. We thought it was you. It's not me, I said. It's the empty apartment upstairs. We know, the man said quietly. We asked the landlord about it. He won't discuss it. They invited me inside. We sat at their kitchen table and compared notes. They had been hearing the footsteps for 8 months. Always the same patterns. Always from the empty apartment. The landlord's been renovating that unit for over a year, the woman said. But no real progress. Like he's stalling. Why? I asked. She hesitated. We looked into the building's history. A woman lived in that apartment 5 years ago. She died there. Alone. No one found her for 2 weeks. My stomach dropped. How did she die? The article didn't specify. Just said, natural causes. But she was only 42. We sat in silence for a moment. Do you think? I started, then stopped. I don't know what to think, the woman said. But those footsteps are real. And they're not from any living person. After that conversation, I couldn't unhear the footsteps. Every time they started, I thought about that woman. Alone in the apartment. Walking back and forth. Waiting for something. In June, I began finding my door unlocked in the morning. I was certain I'd locked it before bed. I started double-checking. Taking photos of the locked deadbolt before sleeping. In the morning, the deadbolt would be unlocked. The door still closed, but unlocked. I changed the locks. The same thing happened. One morning, I woke to find my apartment door standing open. Not just unlocked, open. About 6 inches. Enough to see into the hallway. I got up and closed it, my hands shaking. That evening, I heard the footsteps approach my door. They stopped outside. I heard the doorknob turn. I stared at the door, watching the knob move. It turned fully, but the deadbolt held. The door rattled slightly as something pushed against it from outside. Then the footsteps retreated. Back up the stairs. Into the empty apartment above. I moved out in July. Broke my lease. Forfeited my deposit. The landlord didn't try to stop me. As I was loading my car for the last time, the downstairs couple came out. You're leaving, the woman said. Not a question. Yeah. We're leaving too. Next month. Can't take it anymore. I nodded. Did you ever find out more about the woman who died? She pulled out her phone and showed me an article she'd saved. A photo accompanied it. I recognized the face. Not because I'd seen the woman before, but because I'd seen that exact expression. In my doorway. Late at night. when I'd glance up from my phone and catch a glimpse of something in my peripheral vision. That same face. Watching. Waiting. Her name was Claire, the woman said. She had a routine. Walked the same path every evening. Home from work at 5:15, up the stairs into her apartment. She lived alone. No family. No close friends. When she died, no one noticed for 2 weeks. I looked back at the building. At the windows of that empty third-floor apartment. She's still following her routine, I said quietly. The woman nodded. I think she doesn't know she's gone. Or maybe she does and the routine is all she has left. I drove away that day and didn't look back. But sometimes in my new apartment on the ground floor of a different building, I'll hear footsteps above me. And I'll tense up, waiting for the pattern I recognize. It's always just my upstairs neighbors. Real people. Living their lives. But for those first few seconds, I'm back in that apartment. Listening to footsteps that shouldn't be there. Watching my doorknob turn. Knowing that Claire is still walking her evening routine. Still coming home. Still trying to unlock doors that no longer belong to her. A big thank you to Marcus, Jay, and Maya for sharing their experiences. And to everyone listening, no matter where in the world you're watching from, I hope these stories have made you think twice about the spaces you occupy and the sounds you dismiss. Stay safe and remember, not every footstep has a living source. Not every sound is what it seems. This is me, Andrew, your storyteller, the voice behind these stories. You can call me signing off.